haven't got long, we've got 10 or 15 minutes, but it would be great to draw out some questions that relate to those fantastic presentations. Thank you very much. One of the things that I think came up in discussion at the end of the day yesterday and Sally, and maybe it's came into my mind in these presentations this morning, is the whole question of motivation. I mean, what is it that curators on one hand and artists on the other hand, and maybe they are slightly distinct functions, are looking for when they embark on projects with plays? Why is it interesting to set out to draw meaning out of plays? And for whom? And into what agendas? Can I ask you to as well?
Yes.
You can talk about why. Why?
Why? I mean, the answer is because I don't know. Yes, because this is the main motivation in my art, because I don't know. Because if I would know the answer, I wouldn't make work of art. The work of art is an adventure, and sometimes you go to the answer, sometimes not, but the process is important. The process which is built on the doubts, the process which is built on the worries. But this is the motivation, this is why, for me.
And maybe I could just add to that. I mean, Folkestone obviously is a very special situation because it's trying to set up a project, as I said at the beginning of the talk, that has no cultural infrastructure and that is itself a place that is quite forlorn and melancholy and has been sidelined and isolated and forgotten about for quite a long time. So I think the objective or some of the ideas surrounding when we set up the triennial was to bring back a sense, to excavate really some of the extraordinary history, because I think that was amazing for all of us. I think for the curatorial organizing team, as well as I think for every artist who visited, an incredible sense of surprise to realize how much amazing history there is. And so the triennial became a tool for mining this forgotten history, and for also maybe, because when you speak to people there is a very negative feeling about the place, and there isn't any sense of pride there. So it was also to instill, through the work that the artists were doing there, instill or reignite a sense of place, and with it a sense of pride of place, maybe. So I think that's some of the motivation why we did our project, but I don't know.
Can I ask Kasia, actually? I'm interested.
It's a tough question because I think our project has a bit of a different agenda than the folks in Triennial in terms of like community, the local community or the presence of art. There's also no infrastructure in Oxford for culture, but it's not our concern. For me, I think it's a very small scale to some extent project, and for me the learning part is the most rewarding one, because observing the process and the artist working with the context, which is very difficult. I mean, it's not an appealing place, it's not a picturesque ruin, and they are struggling, and then all the conversations which are held, it contributes to this version of the place or the vision of it that maybe
So
at some point
when an
will move
artist like,
forward.
say, Castadine, or the artists you work with so far, are brought into this place, with which most work has a biographical, personal, and you use this word very accurately, intimate relationship. How do these artists who are brought in from elsewhere respond to that invitation? Yes, you.
I I think that they just needed a while. It takes time. It's not a situation when you react immediately. Because it's, on one end, it's very personal, and the moment you depart from the studio and go to the city, it's a very loaded context. So it always takes time, and I think I can't speak for Tassity and Luke because these are the projects we just yet not realized. But we've been observing Charlotte, who came back to Watford 3 times, and she was first living there, and then she decided that it's too heavy on her, and then she was going back. It's digging, and the valuable part of it is, I think, you really feel that they want to do it because it's not a prominent place. There's no brand behind it. The public is, I would say, very limited. So it's this kind of very also personal aspect of approaching it. That we connect very quickly with this, I don't know, the lure of the local and the personal and intimate. So I would say this is important.
And is it an artist's project primarily? I mean, do you see it as part of your work as well?
In this project I try to be on the margin. Of course, there's a big pressure of my studio when friends and these younger artists who became friends later, when they visit this place. Many of them, they want to do something with the studio. So I try to ask them that maybe they should look around, because I don't want to build the memorial of activity of Miroslaw Balka in Otwock, but I'm trying to ask them to do something which is maybe not necessarily logic, but something which means something for them, because these are the people who we trust, and this is a trust in the artist. And it's a big field, and I think that everybody, invited artists, dig by themselves. So they dig the holes in different parts of the town, and they discover different layers. It depends what is their practice, what is their experience. They come to the different layers, and this is very free formula. But actually, I don't treat it as my work of art. I'm really kind of the person who is on the margin. However, this margin is unfortunately visible in this way. But the structure of this project is very open. We are not. We don't say that this is a sculpture park. We don't say. So everybody makes different things.
And is curiosity a motivation for you?
Yes, very much, because, like for example, with Luke Toymans, we are friends from more than 20 years. So this is a different relation to invite a friend to the house. And then I'm very happy with this project, which is Luke is going to do, which Kasia briefly explained. But also, these projects of these younger artists are very inspiring for me, because also I like the limits, and it's nice how they cut away the possible branches which I could use, which I could jump on. So I have less possibilities. And this is the same practice which I have with the students, because from a couple of years I teach the Academy of Fine Arts in Warsaw. And because I don't have this formula that I know what I will do the day after tomorrow in my studio. I'm still trying to surprise myself with something, or discover something which I didn't know when I woke up. But so this is the same with the students when they, as I run the studio there, when they propose something, and this is the subject which I explore, but in the moment when they say what they would like to do, in this way, they cut away my project. But this is quite perverse and tempting, I have to say, in this process.
Nils, do you want to respond to the why question?
I'm interested on a kind of political level in terms of methods and ways gentrification works and the way that the public sphere is slowly becoming eroded. And that, for me, and artists are completely inscribed within that process, and some of the things that we're describing, being described over the last 2 days, are also part of that process, very, very, in sometimes quite instrumental ways. And as an artist, I'm just interested in how do you work within that, and how do you work critically within that, and also as a teacher to work with students to also think about that critically as well, that those gentrifying processes whereby art is, and it's not a particularly new, well, it is a new thing, it's only something that's really been strategically defined by cities and by developers over probably since the 90s. It's not a particularly old thing. So that for me is kind of a very interesting place in terms of discourse and working as an artist. So that's why I'm interested in it.
Are there some other questions? I know I've said it, but
I'd like, I suppose there's a very clear thread running from Liverpool to Folkestone and maybe also across to Poland in terms of the past and the present and the idea of local knowledge and the host and the guest. And I suppose I was wondering in terms of running biennials, to what extent you feel you can set up a strategic and communal platform which is owned by many people, in distinction to the fact that you are the person who's leading it and you've led it for 2 years. And I don't know how you feel in terms of talking about the future, whether it's a future that you've established, and whether the past is your personal take on what you can do in Folkestone, and then you hand it over to another individual, or whether there's a kind of communal platform which is established for many people and an understanding of that strategic way forward.
Well, the future, if I start with that immediately, the way when I set up the triennial as a concept, the idea was that there's a different curator for every triennial, and it really wasn't part of the plan that I was doing the second one, but anyway. But as you might or might not know, Louis Biggs is my successor there, so he will, I hope, shake up the whole thing and reinvent the structure and make his own thing of the triennial. But I think one thing that we learned from the first to the second one, analyzing the things that could be improved and could be changed from year one to year two, to the second iteration, was that we wanted to have, ownership in a place like Folkestone. It is, I cannot stress enough how different it is to work there than to work in London or Paris or Berlin. It goes without saying maybe, but you really have to involve and think every step that you take. You have to think also of the grassroots, of the local residents. And I don't mean pander to them in any way, but you have to strategically think with every decision you make of the local residents. And one thing we did to have a closer link to them the second time round is that a year before we opened, we again had an invitation. We had several evenings. One was to all local businesses and taxi drivers and local organizations, where we talked about our plans and tried to make them aware of what we were doing and see how they could, well, it was an information as such, but it was also an invitation for them to get more involved. And secondly, we invited all artists who live and work not only in the town but also regionally, and we had I think over 250 artists turn up to that evening, and we initiated what then became a fringe, and I think that fringe helped enormously to have a proper to anchor the triennial much more in the town, and it felt much more like a collaborative effort. And there are many other thoughts like that. I don't know whether that answers your question as such. Where it's a project where you develop strategies all the time by analysing what you've just done, because it is such an unknown field.
I think there was a question over there.
It's a question for Nils, really, about the nature of these spaces that he's creating. I'm very interested in the fact that in recent years there's been this vogue for mining the past for, if you like, alternative futures. So the visions of the future in modernism, and particularly the kind of Soviet visions of the future. There's been several exhibitions, and people seem to be kind of desperate to find something, because we, as a society, in effect, we've lost our future. We're living in kind of infernal present. So I understand that completely, but the difficulty, of course, is once you do that, how you reconnect it to the contemporary and how it can become more than nostalgia and fantasy. So with respect to these spaces, I'm just kind of interested to ask how Neil understands them as spaces. Are they models for something? Are they provocations? And how do they become more than a folly? And I mean a folly in a very specific kind of sense of an architectural spatial form, which is a kind of reverie within a privileged space.
It's like I was saying yesterday. It's very specific from project to project how these things kind of work. But what I try to do more and more is actually not, these projects don't necessarily look onto or engage with the art world. They're more to engage with planners, architects, landscape architects, and engineers who I work now much more closely with in developing these types of projects. And that, for me, is kind of the key to developing maybe a different type of paradigm, if you like, in terms of how cities are made. So I don't see these as kind of spaces of relational aesthetics in terms of where they're art projects per se. They're actually I try together with the people that I work with to really reorientate them to almost a different audience, if you like. But of course not ignoring the other audience, but sort of maybe just opening it more to larger groups of people, and by working more closely on developmental stages with people like urban planners, which as an artist is actually a lot easier to do than if I were, say, a geographer or an architect. It's actually, you're very privileged in being able to negotiate these kind of different spaces. But it is, sometimes that's exactly what they are, just follies. And sometimes they can move a little bit outside of that, but it is very difficult. And it really depends on the project. It's very difficult. I find it very difficult to generalize about these types of projects, not just mine, but others, in that they're very specific to the site and the local conditions and the people involved and so on. So, and what happens within them are very different. They're not things you can really say, well, those are that type of project and those are that type of project. They're very specific to the conditions in which the process of where they unfold. But your question is interesting, something that really is something that confounds me, something I think about a lot, and it's something that I try just to treat strategically, sort of move away from in terms of interfacing, talking to other groups of people who have maybe, in terms of the way cities are developed, have maybe more fingers on the buttons, if you like.
But do any of your students go into those professions?
No, but they come from those professions. So I get a lot of students from architecture and landscape architecture, ecology and geography who come to the school.
I think I'm getting a signal that, which is maybe coming from you as well, that coffee is needed. Quite seriously, that.